Hello there, beautiful teachers, and welcome to the Vibrant Music Teacher Chat. This is the weekly show on YouTube where you can find out what's going on in the music teaching industry, what resources we're creating at Vibrant Music, and we discuss a special topic each week. So today we're going to be discussing rebuilding student skills after you've had a summer break. That's a lot of S's, it feels like. So that's our special topic of today. If you haven't met me before, hello. My name is Nicola Canton. I run a business called Vibrant Music, and I teach in my home studio in Dublin, Ireland as well. So we provide resources for teachers, and I'm a real teacher. So there are things that I need in my studio and I know you need in yours. And every week we meet up here on YouTube to hang out, discuss something special, and have some chats. So if you are new here, do leave a comment. Let me know where you're joining from and how you found us and what you think about this idea of rebuilding student skills. So we are going to be diving into our special topic in just a moment, but first of all, we have a lot to catch up on since this is the first live after the summer break. So let's cue the news. All right, so much news, and I want to hear your news. So if you are joining me, do let me know what's been going on with you, what's the latest and greatest, and maybe the latest struggles too. I have been doing so much since it's been the summer. So I had a proper summer holiday, which was amazing. I got to go to Portugal with my husband and my mum, which was really lovely. And we went to Lisbon and then to Setúbal, which is a little bit south of Lisbon on the sea. And it was just blissful. It was beautiful. It was a little bit too hot, but nothing I couldn't handle. And we were on the sea, so it was very manageable. And then I had loads of work all summer, as I usually do, getting ahead on some Vibrant Music stuff, creating courses for next year, creating games, and working on some really secret projects, which I may reveal at some point before the new year. I haven't decided when to announce these yet, but I'm not going to tell you what they are yet. Suffice to say, Bright Notes is doing something amazing next year. That's our member magazine. That's going to be super amazing. I'm not going to tell you what's happening, but you can guess if you like, but I won't tell you, even if you guess it. And then there's one thing that's brand new that I'm not going to give any hints about, but it is mega. So I've been working on those over the summer. And then at the end of the summer, I went to the European Piano Teachers Association conference in Portugal again. I had never been to Portugal before. I've been to most European countries, but never managed to make it to Portugal. And then ended up going twice in one summer, just the way it worked out. So that was in a beautiful city called Guimarães. If you've never been, if you like Portugal and you've never been to Guimarães, oh my God, what a beautiful city. It's known as the birthplace of Portugal. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah, it was just a gorgeous conference. It was a gorgeous experience. I've never been to EPTA, the European Piano Teacher Association conference before. And I was speaking over there, and it was wonderful to get to do something in person. It's my first in-person conference since the pandemic. And speaking of conferences, my other news is that I was accepted to MTNA, which more of you may be familiar with. So that is going to be in Reno, Nevada. Reno, Nevada, it's in March. That's the other thing I was trying to think of. It's at the end of March. So tickets aren't on sale yet or anything, but they've told the speakers if they're accepted, and I get to speak there, which is amazing. So I'm going to be traveling to Reno, which is incredible. If you're going to be at MTNA, let me know. Also, if you want to get in touch with me and tell me what to see near Reno, I've kind of got one extra day at the very start. So yeah, if you've suggestions, I know Lake Tahoe is nearby. I'm not sure whether that's a good idea at the end of March, whether it's going to be too cold to really see it in its glory, or whether it would be beautiful in the cold. I don't know, but any other suggestions would be appreciated. And if you are going to MTNA or thinking about it, please let me know. I'll keep mentioning it on the way there because I would just love to meet you in person. It would be so special to meet some online friends, more online friends in real life, as I used to do before the pandemic started. So yeah. Oh, I need to move quickly because there's so much news. The other big news is actually next week. So VMT, Vibrant Music Teaching, the membership site, is going to be 5 years old. I cannot believe this. Every time I think about the number, I'm like, what? I just started it. I mean, I didn't, but it kind of feels like I did, you know? So, yeah, it's going to be 5 years old this Saturday, and we are celebrating here on the YouTube show next Wednesday, same time as this one. So that celebration is going to be super fun. I'm going to do a sort of games countdown, which will be fun, and I'm also going to be announcing the winner of VMT for Life, which is our current competition that is running on Instagram and Facebook. This is only for members. Current members can post. We've sent emails about it, so check your inbox if you haven't seen this already. You can post images of our little cutout flamingos, and we're going to pick one of the members who posted one of those posts, so the more times you post the better, to win lifetime Vibrant Music Teaching membership. Lifetime. For the rest of your life. Never have to pay a dime, as they say, again. So yeah, that is going to be announced on the show next week. I'm going to be asking you to pick a number at random, because that way it's definitely totally random. So I'm going to put it in a sheet. I'm going to ask you guys to pick a number at random, and I'll pick one of those numbers at random, and that'll be our randomization system. That sounds like I'm making it way too complicated. I promise I'm not. But that's going to be fun. I'm so excited to draw that and give someone this lifetime membership, because I just think, yeah, I can't wait to do it. And I can't wait to celebrate VMT's 5th birthday. So our birthday party live streams are always extra fun. So I'm really looking forward to that. Other news, quickly, is that we will... Oh, nice, Elizabeth! Yes, take Franny with me. With you. Franny is one of the little cutout flamingos. I keep looking around because I feel like I had one nearby, but I don't. So I can't show you. But little cutout flamingo, post something about VMT with your little photo of your flamingo. Like my shirt. Flamingos everywhere. Flamingos for everyone. You get a flamingo and you get a flamingo. Okay, I promise I'm going to stay on track. So, the other piece of news is that we have a new course coming out next week. It's called Money Maximizer. So this is for members of Vibrant Music Teaching. There's a new course next week, Money Maximizer, and it's going to help you maximize your money, quite simply, because it's something we all need. So I was feeling the need for this over the summer, and I decided to put it together, and it's just giving you, tips, nothing you've never heard before in your life, but it's putting it all together into a course so you can take action and really make sure that your studio is making the money it could be, that you're not spending things that are unnecessary, and that you're maximizing your profit without cutting down on your services. It never means that. It means making the most of the money you have coming in and spending wisely. So that course is going to help you do that next week. I hope you're looking forward to that one, as we all deal with the incredible inflation that is happening right now. We just won't talk about that too much. Recently on the blog, our theme has been teenage students. So if you haven't seen any of those posts, definitely go check those out. We've got some great articles out already and coming out soon about teaching teens and helping them stay in lessons and connecting with them better and all that good stuff. And here on the YouTube channel, if you haven't seen already, we had a review out about Star's new book, which is a solfa-based piano method. So if you're curious about that, definitely check that one out. Our focus topic of today is all about catching students up to where they were after a summer break or a teaching break of any kind. So if you've had students and taken a few weeks off, you know this feeling. A few months in our case here in Ireland, where they're not getting lessons and they just start to slip backwards. And I find this happens more with students in their first few years. I don't know about you, but for me, it doesn't happen so much with intermediate students, or at least it's not as noticeable. But when they've only had a year or 2 years of lessons and they have that summer break, I think the percentage, the way the ratios work out, just make it in contrast a bigger break for them in some way in their brain. Anyway, that's how I make sense of it. Whatever the case, I think we need to have strategies for catching them up, for making sure we're not missing anything, for making sure we're not assuming they still know things from last year, moving forward, and then realizing there's a gap later on because that knowledge was never really regained. So we need to pull those things from the back of their head before they fall out completely. So I'm going to go through my order of priorities for this, and I'd love to hear if you have anything to add to this list. But for me, it starts with the parents. So at the start of a new term or a new year, it's a great time to get in touch with parents and make sure they have the practice information they need and that you're reminding them of things you already told them as well. So I know the start of a new school year is a busy time, but it really, I think, is important to capitalize on that feeling of newness. There's a thing in habit creation, which is the fresh start effect. So you're more likely to stick to a new habit or a goal you have for your daily routine or something like that if you start it on a fresh start day. So that could be a Monday, like it can be the start of a new week. But this is why people start new habits for the new year or based on other milestones that are happening. When it feels like it's this fresh start day, it can make a difference to how much we feel able to start a new habit. And I think that can go a long way. So if you emphasize this new school year, new routine thing, it gives people this fresh slate. It's not more of, oh, we're failing at practice even more. It's like, no, this year we're going to do it. And yeah, maybe they won't, but it gives you a little bit of an extra shot of making that happen. So I always email parents a few times in the first month of the year. That is returning parents. New parents get a lot more than a few emails about this because they get a email sequence that I have automatically sent out to them for basically the first semester, like the first 4 months. They're getting emails every week in the beginning and then every 2 weeks after that, so that they, we're staggering out all this information we need to get across to them. But for returning parents, that's where the September effect is really important, I think. So I make sure to email them, let them know some of the things that might be coming up for their child as they enter a new phase, a new school class or whatever they're doing. So, for example, if I have students who are moving from primary to secondary school here, which is like going from elementary to high school or elementary to middle school if you use that system, I make sure to give their parents some information about, okay, it's going to be tough to make practice happen in the beginning. I'm going to give your child, your teen, 5-minute practice suggestions. We have a resource on the site for that called Take 5, if you're curious. But I'm going to give them this, and this is how we try to encourage it, and your role is changing as a parent, that kind of information. Or if they're younger than that, the information is a bit different, but I'm giving them some tips based on where I know their child is at. Also, one thing I added this year was to make sure to give some extra information to parents of students who take lessons at home. So if you travel to students' houses, I don't personally travel to students' houses, but I have some of the other teachers who work here, they do that on some of their teaching days. So we do have students who take lessons at home. And I made sure to put an extra paragraph into their first email they were getting from me about just setting things up at the beginning of lessons, because I feel like that's a big pitfall a lot of them have fallen into, which is, okay, if there are multiple siblings, decide what order you're going in and stick to that forever. I don't know if there's any travel teachers here. You might have come across this. I know I did when I was still travel teaching myself, where you'd arrive and then there's this fight about who's going first. And it would be 50-50 whether they're fighting to go first or not to go first, depending on what goes on in their house. But either way, it's just wasted time. It's so much easier if you just say, okay, it's this order, the end. And sure, they can change it later if they need to, if it suits their family. But there's no reason to have that discussion every week. I've had families alternate and then they can't remember who was last week. And if I can't remember, then it's a whole thing. It's just a mess. So I told them, decide who's going in what order. Just stick to it. Stop messing around. And then the other big thing for all of them, even if they don't have siblings taking lessons, is the pre-lesson routine. I'm trying to get parents to make sure that their child is not on the Xbox, on the computer, watching TV directly before their lesson. Because then they feel like they've been pulled out of this super addictive, hyper motivating in a way environment, this screen environment which is designed to keep them there, and then they're ripped out of that and put at a piano, and it's just not a good way to start a lesson. So I want them to arrive at the piano 5 minutes before we're supposed to get there, whoever their teacher is supposed to get there, and spend that 5 minutes improvising or practicing, but arrive a few minutes early rather than suddenly scrambling to get there when we arrive. And of course, we're not going to insist on that if they say, yeah, no, this is just the way it has to work out because he has to get his homework done after school, or we're only in the door just before this. Fine. But those are some of the tips I've been putting in. Whatever is applicable to you, I'm just giving you some examples. Make sure to bring this up with parents right at the start of the school year, or if you're already a few weeks in, no worries, bring it up now. It's still a great idea to make sure that we don't neglect our returning parents just because they heard it all before last year or several years ago when they first started. Doesn't mean they don't need to hear it again. One more thing on this is that we have a YouTube series that is dedicated to this. So I have a book which is called Practice Pi. It's the yellow one over my shoulder. Practice Pi is the book. You can get that for your studio families and lend it around or get a few copies or encourage them to get it themselves. But I also have a free series right here on YouTube that they can watch, and it's kind of a condensed version of the book in a way. So if you search for Practice Pi on YouTube and send your families that playlist, there's a playlist with all the videos put together. That can be a great place to start too. Okay, after we've dealt with the parents, we need to get into the actual student and what they've forgotten. So don't worry, I haven't forgotten that the students have forgotten things. Here is where I start. Technique. So their first lesson when they come back after the break, and at the start of every lesson at the beginning of term especially, I want to really focus in on technique. The reason this is my number one thing is even if they didn't forget anything, they've probably grown. And so you have these kids coming back and like tucking themselves in and they've no room to move. Has anyone seen that this month? I certainly have. And it's like, no, you're a foot taller now. You need to sit further back. You need to be lower down, whatever the adjustment is. Or sometimes, only their torso has grown or only their legs have grown. So you just need to readjust their seating. So I start every lesson with a few stretches. I just get them to stretch out their fingers, stretch their wrists, roll their shoulders, and then sit down at the piano and check it themselves. So first I ask them, okay, sit down and tell me whether you're the right height and the right distance. And if they just sit down and look at me blankly, I say, put your hands on the keys, check it out. And I get them to assess it. And then, of course, I correct them if they're wrong. But I want them to have a go first because they need to take ownership over this. They need to be able to adjust their own bench. And it might seem so foundational that it's silly to even bring it up, but it's not. And this rings true in actually our local exam board. I was at one talk and one of the senior examiners there said the number one problem he sees is this students tucking themselves in and then they can't reach the notes for their piece. And it's just such a shame because they prepared these pieces for months and they're in this, stressful situation. And if they just took a bit more space, they would have played so much better. So it's really important. And I try to emphasize that right at the start of term and then deal with some of the more detailed technique things like making sure I'm paying extra attention to whether their wrists are dropping down, whether they're losing their posture in the middle of pieces. And I don't mean that they need to be super rigid, just that they're, sitting up tall, proud, that kind of thing. Are their fingertips suddenly collapsing or have they gotten better when they used to collapse? Those kinds of issues and their knuckle bridge, all of these things that can just adjust over time. My next thing is note names. So this is only for students where I am actually focusing on their note names at this stage. So I play some games with them. I say that because in the first year or so with many young students, I'm not focusing that much on note names. I'm only teaching them a few landmark notes and then focusing on intervals more, so I would skip this step. Maybe go over the landmark notes, although they're usually hard to forget since we drill them so much in the first year. But if a student is naming notes all over the staff, have they forgotten how to do it? Have they come up with some silly new strategy that isn't effective and they need to relearn how to name the notes? So I usually play a note name game at the very first lesson. Often in our buddy lesson time, which is the shared lesson time for us. You can play it in the solo lesson time as well. That's simple. If there is an issue, if they've forgotten a lot of their note names, they're not naming them as well as they used to, or they were always weak at naming notes, then we need to do a lot more drilling of that. So I would tend to have them work on the 60-second challenge, which is our flashcard challenge, a timed flashcard drill. Straight away if I feel like they need an extra focus on that area. And I would also suggest some note naming apps to the parents. It's always optional in my studio because screen time can be a sensitive issue, but I will make the suggestion that maybe it would be beneficial to do a little bit of this app. Or I normally give them a choice of 3 and say whichever one appeals to your child is fine because there's so many good ones out there. My next thing is intervals, or this might be the first thing if we're not focused on note names yet. And the intervals are super important. Most of my students haven't forgotten them, but I just want to play a game or two to focus back in on them. And I also want to make sure that they're able to perform them in their hand. So just a quick drill of like literally put your hands on the keys, 1 finger per key. Okay, play a second, play a third. As simple as that, and then close your eyes and the same thing. Play a second, play a third. Or you can say go up a second, go down a third, and have them work it out that way. I want to make sure they're relating it correctly back to the piano. Those check-ins just take a minute or 2, literally. Then we have the technical exercises. So as I said, these are in order of priority. I might not get to the technical exercises on the first week. I might. Depends on the student and how they're going with all the other things. But I make sure to go over the technical exercises that they knew before. So by that I mean it could be scales, it could be animal safari, piano safari animal exercises, which are the animal techniques like kangaroo and Sakurai zebra, whatever's relevant to that child. Or it could be other technical exercises we're doing from another book, say if they're at a more advanced level. But just going over them, making sure to make a note of which ones don't they know well, which ones have they remembered really well, are there any technique issues creeping into their technical exercises, that kind of thing. And then I get to the terms and the other theory. So for this, it's not my top priority right away. Yes, they will have forgotten a lot of words. I'm not saying it's not the most forgotten thing. It's just not the most important for them to relearn right away, in my view. So by other theory, I normally mean students are further along, maybe, interval qualities or whatever has come up for them so far, but making sure to go over these things. So this will come up in their written work. All my students are working through a thinking theory workbook, which is my own workbook series. I did that because it's behind me, but you can't even see it. It's behind my head. So my own workbook series, or if they're beyond that level, they're working through a different theory workbook. If they're right at the beginning, they're not doing a theory workbook yet, if they're really young, but they don't need to know many terms yet either, so there wouldn't be too much of that. But we would play a theory term review game, say a few weeks into lessons, not right at the start, but maybe within the first month at some point, to go back over the terms that they're supposed to know by this point, see which ones they're remembering or forgetting, and how much we need to focus on that area. But it's just not my number one thing to do right away. Now, the final thing I wanted to mention on this, so those are my top things to review, and as you saw me mention, most of them I review through games or through very quick playing exercises. At the same time as that, we are, of course, learning new repertoire and moving on in things in that way. One thing I do with all my students, in general, I don't pick up pieces that we were halfway through before the summer break. I don't know whether you do, but I have found over time that it's better to just start fresh. And sure, it would have been great to learn that piece fully, but there's normally another piece that will teach the same concept. There's never going to be a piece that is the only way they're going to learn this particular thing. And so I find it works better with my students to just let go of the old things and move on. I always give them the chance that if there's something you're working on that you really want to polish to a high standard that you love, or you just are determined to finish, great, let me know. We'll keep going with that. But otherwise, we start all fresh things. So most students are happier to just start fresh pieces. It just gets rid of that issue where they kind of half learn a piece, then it's the summer break and they just don't play it all. Or they play something else because it's summer break. So they're just doing their own thing, learning Disney songs, whatever they're doing. And then they come back and they feel like they already kind of know this piece, but they don't know, their fingers don't know how to play it like at all. So they have to start it from scratch, and it can just be a terrible way, I found, to start off a new year. So that's the way I work on these things. I just go on to the next piece, but up to you, of course. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention in this area is about tracking progress. So I just want to quickly show you our sheet. This is inside Vibrant Music Teaching. I have already put the link for this into the description. So if you look at the YouTube description right here, you'll see this link. It'll only work if you're a member, but if you're not a member, you can sign up, of course, on the same website. But this is my sheet, and this is roughly what it looks like, and this video talks you through it. And then there's a link to download the sheet there. So the reason I'm bringing up that sheet is I think it's really important to track these things. And I think it's extra important at the end of the year and the start of a new year. So because I did this with all my students last year, we did it across the whole studio. We all use this sheet. Each student has their own sheet, their own tab. And we track their current pieces, how they're practicing, like whether they practiced that week, whether it was good quality, their oral work, their memory work, reading, theory, technique, technical exercises, and then there's an other section. As I say, you can see that on the sheet if you're curious about it. But because we track all of that, I can know exactly where my student was. And it stops me from being a bit delusional, if I'm honest. It stops me from thinking like, oh, this student knew their note names. And then I look back and I'm like, no, actually they were pretty dodgy on their note names. I'm just looking back with rose-colored glasses in my memory. So I make sure to just look back over where they really were, and I make sure to fill this out every week in general, but especially at the start of the new year, so I can make sure we start on a really good note. Things like their practice, if I can look at the first few weeks and see they're not practicing and we're not off to a good start. Practice normally gets worse throughout the year. Anyone with me on that? Anyone think that? It normally doesn't get better miraculously in the middle of the year. There's usually a dip in the middle or at the end or something. But if it doesn't start well, if there's none in September and October, I know we're in trouble when it comes to practice. So that's why I find it extra important to track all these things at the beginning of the year. Okay, so there you have it. That gives you some idea of how I prioritize, how I focus on tracking different things that my students need to do and to catch up on. And as I said, the link is for members in the description. And you can use that sheet as it is or change it to your own style. But that's basically how we track all of these things in my studio. Okay, so it is time for the Ask Me Anything section. If you have a question about anything, I'm happy to take your questions now. Maybe to take more chat as well and hang out with you for a little bit longer. I hope that main topic today gave you some ideas about restarting with your students and not being too hard on yourself. That's the main thing I'd like to get across is don't be too rough. Like if they don't remember their note names and they knew them last year, that's okay. Play some more note name games. It'll come back to them. It doesn't mean all is lost. I'm sure they learned some other things from you last year. So the other thing about that sheet actually is it helps us to see the whole thing, the whole picture of the student. It stops you from getting bogged down in this student, is just terrible at rhythm. And your brain just kind of narrows in on that as a teacher, and you're going, oh, why can't I help him with this rhythm? I'm a failure or whatever. But if you look at that sheet and you see, actually, he practices really consistently, his pitch recognition is really good, you see the other things that are going well, it helps you to kind of relax a bit more. And yes, help him with his rhythm, but also know that you're already doing a good job. Yeah, exactly. Help to not be delusional. I agree. Teresa, I'll just get rid of this. Kickstart theory with a group class doing VMT games. That's a great idea, to do a group class at the beginning of the year as well, and collaboratively work through their theory book. That's lovely. What a great thing to do. Hello, welcome. Great to see some new faces in the chat as well. Yes, face jibbity face is one of my favorites for working on the note names. My other favorite, if you're looking for note name games for reviewing and stuff like that, is Double or Nothing. I love to use that one at the beginning of the year because they can either answer both or one. So if they're feeling underconfident, that's okay. They can just answer one. If they answer both, they get to leap ahead. And Double or Nothing is actually a great one for teacher and student. If you don't ever have multiple students together, but you have you versus a student, and you feel like you don't want to beat them, Double or Nothing is great because you can tell your student, okay, I can only move forward based on the die. So I just roll the dice and move forward. That's it. But you can either name one or both of these notes. When you see the game, you'll see what I mean by this. But it just automatically makes them win if they even answer two of them a few times. So it gives them a really good shot of winning. Christy, yeah, snap. Nice. Carrie asked about the sheet. Sorry, yeah. Thought I mixed up Carrie and Christy there for a second. I didn't. Do you fill this in at the end of each lesson? After a full day, I struggle to remember everyone's progress. Actually, I do at the end of the day, and I find I don't struggle to remember. But I do suggest different things to the different teachers who work here. So you can do it in teaching breaks that you have in the middle of the day, so it's only ever a few students at a time, or at the end of the day, or some teachers really prefer it the next day. Teacher who worked with us last year, sadly, has moved away now, so she's had to move on, but she found she had to do it the next day because at the end of her teaching day, her brain was just fried, so she couldn't remember anything. And then the next day before she started her teaching day, she was so fresh that she remembered everything from yesterday just fine. So it's very individual. For me, it's the end of the day is what works best, or if I forget to do that, the start of the next teaching day. But yeah, you can definitely do it if you save a few minutes at the end of each lesson. It just, you don't want to be filling it in during the lesson necessarily because you've so much to do during that time. One more tip though is, for me, just looking back on their assignments will twig my memory. So if I forget a particular lesson, I'm going, hang on, what did we do? Was that last week? Was that this week? If I look on Tonara, which we use for assignments, or in the old days I would have looked at their assignment sheet, which I kept digitally as a PDF, then just seeing like, oh, those pieces, then it comes back to me. So yeah, it very much depends on each teacher, but and it's up to you how you use it, of course, but just keeping track in some way is very helpful. And by the way, we don't write a lot and we don't use full sentences, so it is very quick. Make sure of that. It's just like, in some columns it might just say good. If it's just good and not amazing and nothing particularly to note, it can just say good. That's fine. If you didn't do that thing, it can just say NA, not applicable. And then in some columns you'll end up saying more because there was a particular note. So, in the scales column or the technical exercises column, maybe 1 week it says quite a lot because you're saying, oh, I need to watch out for this issue with the tempo, and maybe making some notes about what to do next week. So it can be very fluid in terms of what you include. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily
quicker to write on paper, but again, that's individual. For me, it would be quicker to type because my handwriting is atrocious. Um, so, well, like I can write, but I'm faster at typing, and I can do that more mindlessly than I can write. So writing and, say, listening to a student at the same time is actually harder for me than typing and listening to a student at the same time, which is why I think writing is more effective for taking notes, because it takes more of your focus, at least for me. Yeah, okay, good. It doesn't seem like there's any extra questions today, so I just want to say thank you for joining me again after our summer break. I hope you enjoyed our first show back. We will be here next Wednesday for the bonus birthday chat, the super fun. We're going to do a drawing and we're going to go through some games, both free ones and member ones. We're going to do a little countdown, which should be super fun. And we're going to hang out. I won't be drinking champagne since I'll have to teach afterwards. But I will probably have a birthday cake at the ready, which I can show to you. And probably some champagne in the fridge for later on. Well, actually, that'll be for this Saturday, the real birthday. Okay, thank you all so much again for joining me. Great to hang out with you again, and I'll see you next week.